Welcome to No Stage, Just a Chair. I'm Brian, and this is me trying to figure things out without pretending I already know how. If I sound foolish, that means it's working. Music sounds a little 80s? Good. I was basically raised on synths and questionable hair choices. And if any of this sounds familiar, pull up a chair. So when I was in college, I had a sociology professor who had a tremendous, long-lasting influence on my life. And I would sit in my class every day. He was a sociology professor. He was retired military. He had been in the Secret Service. He had worked with the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation. He'd done all these kinds of things. He worked for the Capitol Police. He'd done all of this, had lived this full life. And after he was done with this full life, he went and taught college. And he was fascinating. And I would have the most enjoyable time in his classes. It was always full of life and interest and engaging, and made everything so much easier to learn. One day after class, he pulled me out to the side and he said, "Tell me about what your goals are with your college education." And I wasn't sure where this is coming from because this is just my sociology teacher. And I looked at him and said, "I'm not sure what you mean." He said, "You seem worn out, and I'm really curious what your goals are, because you may be able to keep this up and you may not." And I still wasn't sure what he was asking. And he finally landed and said, "Do you need an education or do you need a degree?" And I thought that was kind of an interesting thought. He said, "The reality is, it's possible to get one, it's possible to get the other, it's possible to get both. It's also possible to get neither. And I'm afraid that you're on track for neither because you just seem worn down." And I knew he was right. So I said, "What do I do about this? How do I figure this out?" And he said, "I want you to go find 5 guys with gray hair that really care about you. And I want you to ask them that question. Ask them if you need an education or if you need a degree." So I sat down with my dad. I sat down with my small town pastor, who was also my best friend's dad. I sat down with a guy that had kind of been a mentor and an influence in my life. And I sat down, when I added it all up together, I sat down with 5 guys with gray hair that really cared about me. And I asked them all the same question: do I need an education or do I need a degree? And ironically, all of them said the same thing, and it surprised me. And I wasn't even expecting this from my dad. They all said, "You need an education." And let me be really clear. It doesn't mean that I needed one and not the other. It was sitting down and figuring out what the priority was. What is the highest need that I had? I've thrown this idea out there that I want to keep throwing out there. And I think that we think in terms of either or, and there are a lot of things where we can look at it as both and. We don't have to give up on something. We just have to know what we choose first. What do we choose first? And after that conversation with 5 guys with gray hair that really cared about me, where I landed was what I need is an education. And as a result, that professor got assigned as my student advisor. And he started working with me on my schedule. Started working with me on what I wanted to take and the classes that I wanted to take. And he started building this degree path, this plan that would give me an education instead of just a degree. And he warned me day one, "Hey, this probably ends in a general studies degree. You'll get enough high-level classes that you're going to be fine, but let's put together something that makes sense for you." Because, and he said this in 1991, this was the conversation. That's how many years ago this was. And that tells you how absolutely ancient I feel right now when I say 1991. But he said, in education for generations, we've told people what to think instead of teaching them how to think. And it's this really beautiful thought that 35 years later still echoes with me. It's a thing that I think about constantly. The idea of learning how to think, not what to think. I wasn't doing tasks. I was building skills. I was building a point of view. I was building this may sound boring or this may sound scientific, but I was building a decision matrix. And he was able to look at it and help me to look over my requirements that I had and build me a list of things that check the boxes of my requirements, but also check the boxes of my education. Something that was attuned to where I was and what I was going through and what I wanted to learn, what I wanted to take away from. And this is a much longer conversation and a much more detailed conversation that I can have right now, but it was something that altered the trajectory of my future. And rather than going into all the details of it, rather than going into all the details of how much it changed me, the thing I want to highlight is that when he talked to me, he wasn't trying to give me an answer. He was trying to encourage recognition. He wanted me to be able to look at myself and answer that question. And how I got there as a 19-year-old, it was sitting down with gray-haired guys that really care about me. They really love me and really want the best for my future. And them giving me feedback, and me as a 19-year-old being able to listen to that feedback and take that feedback and also be able to go, that makes sense. That feels right. That's good. Let's go that direction. And the thing that I want to highlight right now is that's in a perfect world, that is also a reflection of what I want to do in every room with every client. And part of that even flows into one of the statements that I make pretty regularly. When I sit down with clients the very first time, the thing that I tell them is my goal isn't to be right, it's to be helpful. And again, for those of you that subscribe to the either or, I'm not saying that I don't want to be right. It's my decision. It's my hierarchy. My hierarchy, my number one goal is to be helpful. That's what I want more than anything else. And you know what often comes along with that? Being right. It comes along with that. But at the end of the day, my goal isn't to be right, it's to be helpful. Because what I want with a client, what I want with a business owner, what I want with a founder is I want to find that place where they can start to recognize a truth, a fact, a reality that exists inside of themselves, a desire that exists inside of themselves, a goal or a need that they carry around in their DNA. And if they can start to recognize that, hopefully I can have an impact that is as powerful as Dean Hagee's impact was on my life. Because the goal wasn't his answer, the goal was my recognition. My goal with clients isn't to get them to agree with me, it's to get them to recognize themselves. Can we just replay that for a second? Can I replay that for me? The goal isn't to give them an answer. The goal is to give them an opportunity. The goal is to hold up a mirror where they begin to recognize themselves, where they begin to operate from their true desires, their true needs, their true wants, their true wishes, the things that are built into them on a foundational level, not delivering the answer, but creating the conditions for recognition. And here's what's kind of fun about it. Once we had that conversation and I came back with my answer, I let him know I want an education more than anything else. He helped me build out this degree path. I don't even know what he wanted my answer to be. I didn't come back to him and he tried to convince me to do something else. I came back to him with an answer that was fueled from some wisdom that was in my world and also from some recognition that was in my life, in myself. So wisdom and recognition. And 35 years later, I'm happy with that decision. I'm happy with that choice. And I'm happy with where that choice has taken me. And to be honest, I kind of wish that I'd given myself more to that choice if I could do it all over again. That's what I hope I see in clients. I want them to be able to recognize themselves, recognize their needs, recognize their wishes, and begin to operate out of those things. Then we make a plan that says, okay, this is what we know, and this is how we're going to build that out. In the same way he built out my degree path, in the same way he built out my schedule for each semester, it's building out how that looks. Now, here's a little wrinkle that I see and I deal with clients. And it's a common enough wrinkle that I want to highlight it. And when I say common enough, it doesn't happen all the time, but it probably happens 1 out of 10 times. But I'll sit down with a client. We will talk through these things. They will recognize these things. I will ask questions. I refer to it as pressure testing the idea. Let's apply pressure to these things. Let's ask questions. Let's push at it. Let's poke it. Let's prod it. Let's see how this works, how this fleshes out. Let's see what makes sense. And as we're pressure testing it, we're kind of fleshing out what the environment looks like if you do these things. And every once in a while, I'll have a client that we will go down this idea path, and they'll be excited, or it'll be this moment of recognition and realization. But then whenever they leave, there's this switch that happens, and they end up wanting to go a different direction. And you know, the funny thing that not always, but tends to happen when they want to go a different direction. Maybe there's something that I should do differently, but that's a different conversation. But one of the things that commonly happens is when they want to go a different direction, there ends up being this quietness that happens next. And it's almost like they think that I think that they're doing something wrong because they didn't follow through on how we pressure tested this idea. And they get quiet. They don't respond as much. They don't follow up in the way that they used to. They behave differently. And you know what I wish that every client would understand? I wish that they would understand that sometimes that departure is the recognition lived out. Because sometimes the recognition isn't immediate. Sometimes the recognition is having the conversation, fleshing it out, building it up, working through some of those options. And then whenever you land on it, you look at it and go, no, that's not quite me. That's not quite where I want to go. It's almost there. Or maybe it's not there at all, but they've looked at it. And here's the thing that I look at. I look at it and I go, that's recognition. It's actually doing the thing that we set out to do in the first place. The goal wasn't for me to be right. The goal was for me to be helpful. And if the way that I can be helpful is get you on a path that leads to recognition, that's a win. I don't need to have the answer. Do I love to have the answer? Of course. Who doesn't? I don't need to have the answer. I don't need to be right. I need to be helpful. And if the answer to the question is to go down this road and realize that this road is not for you and to come back and try a different tack, by all means. My direction was never the point. Their clarity was. That's the point. So it goes back to the question that I ask. Am I trying to be helpful or am I trying to be right? Sometimes I fail at that. Maybe sometimes I hone in too much on the being right because we all want to be right. Maybe sometimes I don't do a good job of listening for their answer. But at the end of the day, what I want is for them to recognize what it is that they need, what it is that they care about, what it is that they want for the future. That's the goal. Because I don't need people to live out my opinions. I want them to live out their desires and their dreams and their wishes and their priorities. When I had the conversation with the professor, he wasn't trying to give me the answer. He was trying to help me see. 5 conversation, 1 professor, recognition. The job isn't to land the answer. It's to help someone see clearly enough to choose their own. It's my goal in business. It's my goal in relationships. That's my goal with my children. It's my goal in everything. And I had this conversation today that I just want to acknowledge because I talk so interchangeably about a lot of these things. I talk about my children. I talk about relationships. I talk about friendships. I talk about work in all these very interchangeable ways because the reality is, in my brain, the way I think, they are all interconnected and interrelated. And it doesn't mean I treat my children like work. It means that the same skills that I apply to my work apply to my children. They apply to my relationships. They apply to all those things. They're all interchangeable because they are all the pattern recognition that exists inside of me. The goal isn't to be right. The goal is to be helpful. The goal isn't to give you an answer. The goal is to give you recognition, the gift of looking and actually seeing yourself, actually seeing your desires, actually seeing your goals, actually seeing what success can look like. I hope that I get more opportunities to tell the quiet ones that. I hope I can learn the lessons. I hope that I can have the self-control and the wisdom to point towards recognition more than anything else. And this is where I say it messy before you can assume that it was tidy all along. See you next week.